unnecessarily, inexplicably, and pointlessly.
It's sickly.
No, it's not. It says there are 3 reasons for it.
Okay.
One, the 90s, because it introduced a concept of non-narrative to junk. 2, the management and representation class has a great deal invested in regarding the artist as an unfortunately necessary parasitic adjunct to the writer's creative dream. And 3, the standards of reading have plunged so rapidly in the United States that you have 55-year-old men reading the same shit they were reading when they were 15, and in desperate need of having a slather of gravitas applied to what is basically junk aimed at 15-year-old boys. Akin to what I would do if I were to get the rights to do Curious George and take Curious George and the Man in the Yellow Hat back to Africa to fight the Ebola epidemic.
Wait a minute, let me write that down.
And by the way, I am working on a musical version of The Time Machine because whatever, that's another story. Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
This afternoon we're talking about the pulp roots of comic books because somebody suggested it. It sounded like a good idea, and these gentlemen said, "Sure, why not?"
I'm a cheap date.
What? These are some notes.
Let me kind of see.
You may look at my notes. Sure. All right. Since he's reading my notes, why don't we start the introductions on my right hand, just to make sure everybody knows all the players. Sir.
Oh, we have to introduce ourselves?
Enter and sign in, please.
What are you here for then?
To ask the questions.
You know, that's a. He's got the questions. You keep asking the tough questions.
Ron, the metaphysical panel is next. Hi, I'm Paul Levitz. I'm not old enough to have read pulps when they were actually coming out or to be a pulp root of comics, but I'm happy to be talking about the topic. I wrote a lot of comics, edited a few of them, and was nominally the publisher of way too many of them.
Nominally?
Wow. Stepping away from your body of work already. That's fantastic.
No.
Okay.
Happy with the body of my work. I just don't quite know how to describe what you do as publisher other than you have your name on it as publisher.
All right.
Identified.
That was a very cat-like disavowal, though.
Okay. Fair enough.
And you are?
I'm Ron Marz. I wrote some comics and still do when they let me. And I'm a friend of Bob's and a fellow Mets fan, so that's why he twisted my arm into doing this.
And to my left?
I'm Howard Chaykin. I'm a comic book artist and writer. I consider myself a cartoonist. Oddly enough, before I got here, I was thinking about pulps and how much I have no interest in them. But actually Bob, in his notes, which I read while Bob was talking, actually acknowledges the existence of writers who I do take seriously. When most people think of pulps, they think of the Shadow, Doc Savage, and Justice Incorporated, but actually he talks about the guys who are really important, like Bradbury, like Burroughs, like Hammett, like Chandler, and like the Canes, Paul and James M. So yeah, I am that guy. But not that Shadow stuff, not that Doc Savage
Well, there's more to pulps than just those characters, and I want to make sure at the outset we define our terms. Because there's some people here who may know the term and not necessarily know what it really means. So let me give you a little bit of background. Pulp magazines refers to the cheap pulpwood paper that they were printed on. The first officially considered pulp magazines from 1896, publisher by the name of Frank Munsey, put out a magazine called Argosy. It had slick color covers on this cheap pulpwood paper. It was not trimmed, if I recall right, so it had ragged edge and all. And for a dime, you got about 100 pages worth of straight fiction with some illustrations. And they were popular enough that they spanned multiple genres, and lots of other publishers jumped in, notably Street Smith, who gave us these popular characters that Howard is disavowing. And
Not disavowing.
not disavowing, sorry. But there's Hugo Gernsback doing the beginning of what we consider today's science fiction, hence the Hugo Awards. We have these continuing character features that spun off into radio, movies, television, serials, and all, and mostly comic books, but also some of the people who were publishing these magazines wound up moving into comic books. And so there's a lot of connections that people who are not historians may not know. So I think that's one of the reasons we're here to talk about those connections from the characters as well as the creators. To that end, Paul, you can talk a little bit about some of those publishers.
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple lenses you can look at this history through. One is that as readers, we tend to look at the things as very separate and discrete things. The dime novel, the pulps, the comics. But very often the business history of these different forms is very closely intertwined. And what you find when you look back at the roots of the comics, a great deal of the history of the comics, comic books in America as opposed to comic strips, comes from a period in the 1930s when a group of entrepreneurial characters, because they were pretty broad characters as individuals, were brought into contact with each other in New York through magazine publishing and magazine distribution and magazine printing. And before they were in comics, almost all of these people were in some piece of the creation or distribution of the pulp magazines. Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, who arguably created the first ongoing comic with new material, new fun, was a pulp writer. He was a syndicator of material for the pulps. The founders of the business enterprises that became the later version of DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Archie Comics, were all, at one point or another in their lives, working for the same magazine distribution company that was doing a lot of magazine distribution. The founders of DC were publishing the more risque or raunchy branch of the pulps. The founders of Marvel were publishing a series of pulps. These lives interconnected and overlapped in one fashion or another. And the people moved from one business model to another as changes happened in the distribution system, or in particular in New York, as LaGuardia clamped down on pornography when he came into office as the mayor of New York. And that scared some of these guys into moving up. There were also a couple of publishers who were more sophisticated businesses, more established businesses like Street and Smith, that became involved in the comics industry in one fashion or another. And publishers like Fawcett that said, oh, okay, if the comic stuff is working, let's add that to what our existing established healthy business is. At the same time, you have from a very separate lens, you have the guys who were writing and drawing comics, or who would go on to write and draw comics, who were often growing up reading these pulps, very heavily influenced from them, borrowing from them, either honorably, intellectually, in that they were influenced by the material that was in them. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who grew up loving the science fiction material. Sometimes borrowing wholesale. As we found over the years, some of the earliest material in Batman was borrowed rather plagiaristically from some of the material in The Shadow. I don't think that was a unique instance either in that period. There was not a lot of belief in the early years of comics that anyone was creating great and lasting art, or that this was important literary material. It was entertainment. So, okay, how do we do this quick? How do we do this fast? How do we do this for the modest wage we can draw out of this? And let's have some hopefully let's have some fun in the process.
Okay, good, thank you. There was also a bit of a revival of interest in some of the pulp material when paperback houses started to reprint The Adventures of Doc Savage and The Shadow and some of the other characters in the 1960s. So you had a new generation of readers who then went on to enter the comic field, such as the gentleman to my left.
I'm busy. I'm a 65-year-old man who's turned into a 15-year-old girl with the advent of this fucking phone. It's pathetic.
Do you message in emojis yet?
Oh God, I will not. I draw the line.
I thought you just drew the emojis.
I got an email from a comic book fan in Buenos Aires who's a really good guy. He wanted to know what he's in New York. What should he see on stage? So I'm suggesting Matilda or Something Rotten.
Oh, Something Rotten was wonderful.
It's great, and I saw it in I saw it literally on Thursday night in August, and it was 90% understudy cast.
Oh, okay.
And it was a fucking machine that was fantastic. It's vaudevillian and hysterical. The best new show since Matilda.
I agree. Started last October with the original
Fuck that
cast.
waitress shit. It's just awful. You were saying, Bob? I'm sorry.
Anyway, but as I recall, you were a voracious reader as a youth before you got into comics.
I remain one, yes.
And you discovered a lot of these pulp writers.
I've said more than once that the day before my bar mitzvah, I had German measles and thought they were hives, and I was feverish and ill. And I went to the newsstand. There were no new comics, but the Bob Abbott Valentine edition reprints of the John Carter of Marz stories were coming out. They were 50 cents a pound, and I bought A Fighting Man of Marz, Hadron and Castor, Death to Him. And I came home and sat at my stoop, and I read this book, and it was a transformative experience, like Saul on the road to Damascus. It became the third linchpin of my career, which is drawing. One of them was drawing Nazi planes, mumming my Hebrew school homework, like toy soldiers, or as we call them, army men. And Edgar Rice Burroughs changed my life. He demonstrated that, like how long has this been going on? Oh my God, it was fantastic. I really loved it, and I've read everything Burroughs wrote at least 3 times. And, by the way, it's unreadable for anybody over the age of 16. It is so awful. Just wreck.
But the ideas were so fresh.
Well, fresh only because I can't really agree with that. But.
No, I think in 1912 when Tarzan showed up, there was nothing else like it.
Sure there was. There was Kim. There was Mowgli.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, Burroughs had, like Nietzsche says, talent is conviction. Burroughs had enormous conviction because he had painted himself into a hole. He had nothing going on. He was poverty-stricken. Now, he actually stumbles onto an idea. And for me, the Tarzan books are really second grade compared to the John Carter and Marz stuff. Those 12 books are utterly transformative. I saw John Carter in the movies twice in 2 days. I was sitting there the first time with my wife, who was very patient with me, and the second time with a string of posse of lesbians who I'm very close with. And they kept telling me to shut up because I was literally doing the 85-year-old drunken guy in a movie theater thing. Like, oh my God, the ninth ray! Kento's can! I know you have a hard time visualizing this, but the work transformed the way I think about my life. And then Howard, Robert E. Howard, and then Archie Goodman comes along and makes me read all the other guys. Makes me read Cabot, Chandler, James M. Cain. Does anybody read Paul Cain? Anyone? Paul Cain mean anything to you? A novel called Fast One, not The Fast One, but Fast One. Dig it up. Trust me. He's a forgotten giant. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Ron, you've been doing a lot of ERB stuff at Rice Burroughs. What's the appeal for you here?
I had the same childhood as Howard, except for the bar mitzvah part.
It's not too late. It doesn't hurt that much, I'm told.
No, the bar mitzvah doesn't come with a moil.
I think these days to get in late, Howie, you have to do the whole routine.
Might be too late for me. I had the same kind of transformative thing where I discovered the Ballantyne John Carter stuff when I was, the golden age of science fiction is 12 years old. And that's when I found that stuff, and it hit me then and stuck with me ever since. I wanted to, from that point on, I wanted to grow up and be Edgar Rice Burroughs. And again, much like Howard, I've read everything he's written. Probably not 3 times though, maybe just twice for most of it. And now, I wanted to grow up to write John Carter, and it took me 35 years to get there, but I finally got my chance to write John Carter thanks to Dynamite. And I would have done the job for free, but I didn't want Nicky to know that because he would have let me do it for free.
He's now urgent.
But
You mean you don't pay him to do it? He's really slipping.
I got to send him chocolates every once in a while.
Okay.
But those books, and I agree with Howard again that it's they're not really good books, but if they hit you at the right age, they're what stays with you for the rest of your life. Like to me, John Carter's the best thing in the world ever. For some of you guys, probably Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the best thing in the world ever because it hits you at the right age. And I look at it and go, well, that stuff's stupid. Who wants that shit? Just like my kids look at John Carter. When the John Carter movie came out, my kid
Best movie ever made.
my kids got a day off from school because we all went, which they regularly remind me of. But that stuff fired my imagination, and I think if I had not discovered it at the right time, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And to a great extent, I'm done some Tarzan stuff. I've done John Carter. I'm doing some Sunday style strips on the Edgar Rice Burroughs website. One with Rick Leonardi, one with Lee Moder. Mostly because I feel like I owe a debt to that guy that I never met, that I can never repay. And if even just a couple of people rediscover his work and get something even remotely out of it like I did, that I have a responsibility to do that stuff.
The Pulps gave us these larger-than-life characters that got their own titles, that were very popular. The Shadow was so popular it was coming out twice a month. And yet, so many of these characters did not translate well to 4-color comics through the years. Why do you think that might be?
Jesus, he's sitting right here.
I didn't say his run of the Shadow. I just said commercially some of these characters have not performed.
Actually, while we were sitting here, I was thinking about it, and really Howard's Shadow is kind of the one kind of high point of taking those characters into comics that's really looked back on. Finally, most of it hasn't worked, and I'm kind of sitting here wondering why.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. The reality is that my first awareness of the Shadow were the 2 feature films, not the Victor Joy, but the Kane Richmond ones. They were on Channel 5 in New York City, and they fascinated me. And they were 60-minute long. They were B pictures, bottom Bs, and I really dug them. And when I finally tried to read the stuff, it was just the novels were utterly incoherent. And I was asked to do the adaptation material after Michael Kaluta had done them. And back in those days, Kaluta's work was, Kaluta's work on the Shadow was pretty astonishing. Michael is an amazing talent. And I came in, I was the youngest guy in my generation, the least talented and the least skilled. And I had to learn how to do what I do. And I did, I taught myself, because I felt I had to compete with these fuckers who were really naturally skilled. And I beat their asses. And by the time the Shadow was offered to me, Giordano offered it to me on the assumption that I liked this sort of material, and that also didn't tell me that it was already on the schedule. So while my belongings were being moved into my house in California, I was drawing the poster. I literally took my drawing table out and assembled it so I could do the cover, which became the poster, while they were moving into my house. Lamont Cranston, or Kent Allard, is a man born in the late 19th century, which means that he was a racist, a sexist, a bigot, an anti-Semite, and a member of the archetype of white privilege. But
he had some bad qualities too, right?
Thank you. Spoken like a man who understands that you really don't need underoos. But that's the guy. That's who that man would be. And there were a number of writers of some repute in the world of fiction and science fiction who took me to task for having that aspect of his character portrayed. Fuck him. it seems fair to me that if you're going to impose contemporary ethos and morality on material, if you're going to take this material seriously, which I find difficult to do at best, but to do it, you have to take a look at the character, and you can't make him a Fantasia, imposing your own modern values in a 19th century idea. I have an editor at DC Comics who constantly points out to me that one of the reasons I do period material is to be able to use racial epithets and slurs and pejoratives in a perfectly okay environment, and she's probably right. But I'm very proud of the work they did in The Shadow, because it pointed out that the character could be evolved and turned into a contemporary character. The reason that The Shadow, that Batman and Superman are not viewed as nostalgic in that pulp nostalgia is that they survived 1949. The Shadow was identified as a period character because it was canceled in 1949. It did not survive. Had The Shadow continued to be a run in the 50s and 60s, it would have turned into something more like what Don Pendleton was doing with the Destroyer and the Executioner. Something else would have evolved.
Makes sense.
Okay, but its failure has created its milieu. Okay, now The Rock is going to play Doc Savage in a movie written by and directed by Shane Black. What's that going to be like? I have no idea. I'm really kind of curious about it. Okay, is it going to be a contemporary piece? Is it going to be a period piece? I don't know. I'm more curious about that than any fucking Doc Savage novel they're trying to read. You know? Okay.
But for you guys, I mean, pretty much since like Gold Key's run of Tarzan in the 1960s, Tarzan has not been a commercial success in the United States. Anyone that's attempted Doc Savage has not been a bestseller. These licenses bounce from publisher to publisher because there's a fondness for these characters. But why are they not connected, do you think? Is it because they are of a time?
Well, I mean, I think you start from a couple of things. Certainly what Howie just said about the fact that they dead-ended at a certain date and didn't continue to evolve is critical. Because when you come back to a character after decades-long gap, even if you are empowered by your publishing company to reinvent, it doesn't feel like a seamless reinvention. It feels almost of necessity like you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is, I think, one of the major reasons that the John Carter movie didn't succeed commercially, regardless of how wonderful it may or may not be. I love the books. I did not go see the movie. That so many of the elements that Burroughs created that were original were brought to a mass audience in this generation in other media forms. They had been borrowed by other people. So Doc Savage as the Man of Bronze, well, we don't even know. We got this Man of Steel guy who's been around who we grew up on. What's this bronze? That's not as interesting as that. The characters that have borrowed from what was there before have stolen away the magic of freshness and originality in some of those pieces. And that's a burden they take in the process.
That's exactly right.
I can remember reading a review of John Carter that was very pissy about the big arena scene in John Carter because it was obviously cribbed from Attack of the Clones, and I was just incensed that somebody reviewing movies had no sense of history and didn't know.
Well, didn't know if there's a cultural amnesia.
Yeah. I think the modern audience that isn't familiar with this stuff has seen it in so many other packages.
Yeah.
John Carter is actually the most successful movie in history. They just called it Avatar.
That's right. Look, years ago, I was very close friends with a young studio executive when I was starting my career in Hollywood. And this guy was a film student out of Texas. He's deeply informed, and he got an answer print of Citizen Kane, a movie he talked about endlessly with his young colleagues, and showed it to him in the screening room. And these guys were bored out of their fucking minds by this movie. They just fucking hated it because it was in black and white, and they'd seen every single trope that Wells introduced in 1939 used elsewhere. Because it had been picked up, Gesundheit, use your sleeves, okay? Outside ones. And so that the freshness and what all the things, every single trope that Wells invented had been absorbed into the language. And the other thing, the two things that wrecked John Carter as a feature were A, the fact that Stone thought that everybody in the world was waiting for this movie, which was they've noticed. And B, Taylor Kitsch, at no point in time ever read as anything other than a 21st century Canadian. He never convinced me at any point as a man of the 19th century. But it's still the best movie ever made. I'm sorry.
I think there's
So
there's another piece to the puzzle that we contribute to as creative people as a challenge, and it's how he overcame on his shadow wonderfully. I haven't read Ron's work on the Burroughs characters, so I will trust that he managed to overcome it there as well. There are two reasons generally that creative people take on projects in comics that they put their all into. One is that it's an original character that they emotionally own, whether or not they legally have any ownership in it or not. The other is it's something they grew up on and loved, and oh my God, this is my chance to do Batman, Spider-Man, Sugar and Spike, whatever the hell it is that they have passion about. Well, many of the creative people who came to do these characters came to it because they loved what it was, and they were trying to recreate a moment when they were 12, and they were no longer 12. And you combine that desire in their soul with often a licensor that says, no, it must be done the way it always has been done. We must stay within the boundaries. That needs to be struggled against to find the essence of the character and tell the story the way it would be told for a contemporary audience in a contemporary world. For Tarzan, I think that's an extraordinarily difficult problem.
Have you seen the new film?
I have not yet.
Has anyone seen the new film?
Yes.
Okay. The most true to the original mid-source material Tarzan film in my memory. Okay.
I think ever. We made it.
It's very entertaining too.
And I went in there expecting nothing, because I like both leads, but I didn't know quite what they were going to do with it, and they did a really nice job with it. It's a terrific little movie. I don't think anybody saw it.
Yeah. Well, by the numbers, no, they did,
Yeah.
certainly. So I think those things contribute to the problem. It's a real challenge. And many of these characters continue to be contemporary, successful figures in comics or in prose stories in other countries. Tarzan, it's not just the Gold Key material, but Tarzan continued to be a very successful property in much of Europe for many years after it stopped being here in the U.S. But we just haven't had someone who had the passion to make it work. Some of the material was beautiful. I think Joe Kubert's rendition of Tarzan was one of the truly lovely and faithful ones. It came out at a moment when the comic book market was going to hell, and in particular where DC's ability to launch new material had gone to hell for a variety of reasons. So it didn't survive as an incarnation, but it's a real challenge to make this stuff work.
Well, I think I was just thinking about Sherlock Holmes, which works to a great extent as an artifact of the era in which it was created, and yet it also works contemporarily. Right? I mean, for me, not as much.
You talking about the Benedict Cumberbatch stuff?
Yeah. That's and even the House TV series. I hope I'm not spoiling anybody that House was actually Sherlock Holmes.
Holmes, House.
Seriously, there's that translates for whatever reason. Stuff like Tarzan doesn't. If you did a Tarzan movie, comic, whatever it is, that was set contemporarily, it would be awful because we don't live in that world anymore.
They did that on the CW and it failed.
Africa is not that continent anymore. I think you need a fantastic place for this stuff to take place in, and the world's not a fantastic place anymore. We've ruined most of it. But for some reason, and I don't know why this is, Holmes can be picked up and carried and dropped somewhere else, which I don't find to be true of most of the stuff that we're talking about. I don't know that
it's also fair that Holmes is the least fantastic of the characters. mean, he has.
But I mean, I just recently started, only in the past year, started watching The Cumberbatch stuff. Because I watched the pilot years ago and I hated it, and I came back to it under duress, and I like it. But it also, for me, points out the idiocy of the Holmes novels, the Holmes stories, because he's not really a detective. He pulls shit out of his ass. And it's nonsense. I mean, the thing that, at least, and again, one of the things that Archie got me to read